Shalom. So I started this and I wasn't actually totally prepared for it, but I finally finished the this book, Robert Eisenman, James, the brother of Jesus. It is 1,000 pages, uh, more or less, and I wanted to discuss it. I would much rather discuss it with someone else because I am not sure that the things I would say about it are um, coming through. Um, there's a lot there to discuss. I don't recommend reading this book. I think it's already one of the most influential books you could say in human history, but certainly in the past 20 years, maybe in the past 500 years. Um, Timothy Burkhart has shown up to discuss it. Timothy.
Hey.
So, have you read this book?
No, but I love the Apostle James. I named my son after him. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, the premise of the book is essentially that there was a Christianity which was led by the Apostle James. That what really happened was that the election to replace Judas at the beginning of we lost Timothy. At the beginning of Acts is actually, obviously, he would say, an election to replace Jesus. And James won that election. And he believes that later, Luke, whoever Luke is, Paul and the Herodians conspired to rewrite the history of Christianity and what happened to what he calls the Messianic movement in Palestine. And that by paying attention to the various works of literature and especially the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's possible to wade through what we see as history based on the common understanding of what happened 2,000 years ago and reformulate what actually happened in a very different way. And the thing is, I don't think he's convincing of his own image. Like a lot of the stuff he says, I don't think he actually delivers on. Throughout the book, he kept on saying, we're going to prove, we're going to say, we're going to prove. And I got to the end and it was like, yeah, you didn't actually prove these things.
Interesting.
And he rambles. I mean, this is part of the problem with Robert Eisenman. He just rambles over and he repeats himself over and over again. He says, and he has a lot of interesting patterns and ideas. The problem is, well, so it would be easy to just dismiss him, except I do believe this has already been one of the most influential books in human history, because I mean, I guess you could kind of say he's a Martin Luther of our time, in that his ideas have been very influential because of their popularity, not really so much among the intelligentsia, but like people hear his arguments. So I was going to give this example. So the Talmud says that Rabbi Akiva married the daughter of Ben Kalba Savua. And okay, what does Ben Kalva Savua, who was Kalva Savua, right? The son of Kalba Savua, right? Well, we don't really have much idea other than it was somebody who was rich. That's what the Talmud talks about. Eisenman thinks that Ben Kalba Savua should be translated son of the Sabian bitch, which is a way you could translate that. I mean, I'm not saying it's not something you could translate. And he has this idea that the Sabian bitch must have been Queen Helena, who is a historical figure who was very wealthy, and he wants to argue that she was a Sabian and she was an early Christian, and she was part of the part of the original Christian movement with James, and she's been overwritten both by Jewish history and by Christian history in multiple ways. And I mean, it's somewhat convincing. And so when you read things like this, it stays with you, and it's been having an incredible influence. He has been influencing other scholars. He's been influencing a lot of people who are interested about this stuff, and they've been changing their minds. And it's not even really, it's funny, I'm being kind of postmodernist about this, but it's not even a question of whether or not he's right. He's developed a story, that a rewriting of how we read the New Testament, that it's been so influential. It's really been influencing a lot of people. Like when I talk to Father Stephen DeYoung, or talk to Khalil Andani, both of whom are scholars, I would say mostly rather Orthodox scholars, both of them will reject what Eisenman presents here, but they've both read his book. And it's weird. Like, I can't recommend this book. I do not recommend this book. It's 1,000 pages.
You're not selling it.
I am not at all. At the same time, I have to say, I think it's, you know what it reminds me of? Whenever people talk about Luther's 95 Theses, right? Have you ever heard anybody busting out the 95 Theses and being like, "Hey, these are right. We should be paying attention to this stuff"?
Right, yeah.
right? Nobody discusses Luther's 95 Theses themselves.
Well, I think the 95 Theses, for the most part, everybody kind of is like, yeah, most of that's pretty spot on.
Really, is the question whether it's spot on or if it's
I think that most people acknowledge, probably including Catholics, that the issues that the main issues that Luther had were legitimate, and
okay.
they just would disagree about how he went about it, and the fact that he would uh, then break from the hierarchy of the church and not work with, that he would ordain his own priests. That's a line that Catholics can't follow him through. But when it comes to the abuses that he was calling out, I think most people agree with that. Or today would say, yeah, he has a point, at least.
Okay, I think in 50 to 100 years, everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, well, obviously Acts isn't, you can't, like, it's been rewritten. There's no question it's been rewritten. Have you heard of Hegesy?
Yeah, in that sense, I guess then,
Stevus?
if you're right, then it would be similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
What's that?
Oh. Have you heard of Hegesippus? I think I don't even know if I'm saying this correctly.
No.
So he spends a lot of time on Hegesippus and the Clementines and certain documents that, including the Damascus documents and Josephus, which I think the vast majority of people don't even know these things exist, right? Like, you've heard of Josephus. Have you actually thought it was important for you to read Josephus?
Yes, and I have. Yes.
Okay. So he thinks that Saulus...
Yeah, in fact, that's where my interest in James comes from.
Really? Okay. I haven't actually read Josephus. I've only read Josephus as quoted by other people.
The passages that have to do with James are pretty short, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've read. I'm pretty sure I've read those. But so apparently, there's somebody called Saulus in Josephus, and Eisenman is convinced that Saulus from Josephus is Paul of Tarsus.
Interesting. Okay.
Let me see if I can find. And I mean, I think it's actually been. So here's a Reddit thread. Let me pull up the Reddit thread. Are Josephus, Saulus, and Saul, Paul of the New Testament the same person? This is from 2 years ago. Many have proposed this in the past, specifically to a wider audience, Robert Eisenman. When one considers the rarity of the name Saulus and Paul Saul's apparent upper-class status in Acts and within his own writings. Additionally, if it is true that Paul is a Herodian, could that be the real reason for his persecution of the earliest followers of Jesus? Deleted accounts. How many proposed this in the past? Who are the many? Many have just asking questions. Yeah, no real answer to this. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Well,
And
here's
how does Solace show up in
Josephus as a thug and an enforcer for the Herodians. Sounds like a task for the LLM AIs. Oh, you know what? Maybe I should ask. Let me. Oh, this is interesting. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT. Um, I'm having way too much fun with ChatGPT these days. Okay. Okay, ChatGPT. Is Paul of Tarsus the same person as Saulus in Josephus? Well, ChatGPT certainly thinks so. Yes, Paul of Tarsus is the same person as Saulus in Josephus. Josephus was a first century Jewish historian who wrote about the history of the Jews in the Roman Empire. In his writings, he refers to a Pharisee named Saulus who persecuted early Christians before becoming a follower of Jesus Christ. In the New Testament, the same person is known as Paul, and his conversion story is recounted in the book of Acts. It is believed that Saulus changed his name to Paul after his conversion to Christianity. So while Josephus refers to him as Saulus, the name Paul is more commonly used in Christian tradition and in the New Testament. Where in Josephus is Saulus mentioned? Saulus is mentioned in Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews, both book 18, chapter 3, section 3. Here is an excerpt from the section. Now there was about this time Jesus a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as receive the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of, so obviously many people don't believe that this isn't, that this part of Josephus is original, because why would Josephus say that Jesus was the Christ? But at the suggestion of the principal men amongst them, I condemned him to the cross, that those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again on the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold, and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. About this time also, there were other sects of Jewish seditious persons who were also led away by their own wickedness in opposing the Roman power, and were subdued by a great multitude of horsemen and footmen by order of the procurator Felix, who was sent by Nero, Claudius Caesar, to Judea, which stirs up the mind to mention what troubles happened at about this time to the Jews at Rome on account of one Saulus, a citizen of their own. He was by birth a Jew, and had been circumcised on the 8th day. He was a Pharisee by profession, and was not only zealous for the Jewish law, but a promoter of the most obstinate sects which were among them. But Ananus, the high priest, increased in glory every day, and this by means of his insolence and his wealth. He had a brother who was of a disagreeable temper and was named Eleazar. His nature was perpetually wild in the worst sense of the word. And as the fourth of our party, who was Judas the Galilean, he drew a great many into a revolt, who all perished in the same manner as did Judas the son of James. It should be noted that while Josephus refers to Saulus in this passage, the focus of the passage is on the troubles that happened to the Jews in Rome rather than on Saulus himself. Where else is Saulus mentioned? No, this isn't what Robert Eisenman says. So he says Saulus is mentioned only once in Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews, as I mentioned in my previous answer. However, he is not mentioned by name in any of Josephus's other writings. It is worth noting that some scholars have questioned the authenticity of the reference to Saulus in Antiquities of the Jews, suggesting that it may have been added by a later Christian scribe. However, the majority of scholars accept the passage as authentic, and it remains an important historical reference to the life of Paul Saul in the first century. Where does Robert Eisenman think that Saulus appears in Josephus? Robert Eisenman, an early scholar of early Christianity and Judaism, has put forth a controversial theory that Saulus appears in Josephus's works under a different name. Eisenman believes that Josephus refers to Saulus as the Egyptian in his writings, specifically in the following passage. Under the leadership of this man, a number of impostors and charlatans arose who deceived the people with their lies and led them out into the wilderness, saying that God would show them signs of freedom. But Felix, determined to stop these proceedings, with soldiers and horsemen from Jerusalem, intercepted them. The Egyptian himself escaped capture, but his followers were massacred or taken captive. They found among the prisoners a certain priest from Jerusalem named Joshua, son of Hananiah, who was second in command to the Egyptian. Felix had him tortured to make him reveal the names of the ringleaders, but he refused to do so, and so mocked his tormentors, so he was put to death. And no, this isn't correct. This is not what Eisenman is. Eisenman thinks that the Egyptian is actually Jesus. Eisenman argues that the Egyptian was a pseudonym used by Saulus during his pre-Christian years, and that the priest named Joshua, who was captured with him, was actually James the Just, the brother of Jesus. The theory is not widely accepted by scholars, but it has generated significant discussion and debate in academic circles. What was the relationship of Christobarus to Saulus, according to Robert Eisenman? That's not true. So he says Robert Eisenman does not mention any relationship between Christobarus and Saulus in his writings or theories. It is possible that you're referring to someone else. Okay, so in the back, what Costobarus. Sorry, not Christobarus. Costobarus. It's Costobarus. Thank you for clarifying. According to Robert Eisenman's theory, Costobarus, also known as Costoboros and Costobosis, was the father-in-law of Herod Antipas, who was the Tetrarch of Galilee during the time of Jesus. Eisenman suggests that Costobarus played a role in the events leading up to the crucifixion of Jesus, and that he may have had connections to Saulus, later known as Paul. Eisenman believes that Costobarus was a member of a radical Jewish sect called the Zealots, who were opposed to Roman rule and advocated for armed resistance. He suggests that Costobarus may have been involved in a conspiracy to overthrow Herod Antipas and establish a Jewish kingdom of Galilee, and that Saulus, Paul, may have been sympathetic to this cause. Eisenman argues that Paul's persecution of the early Christians was motivated in part by his desire to root out any potential threats to the established Jewish leadership, which included individuals like Costobarus, who were seen as dangerous radicals by the Roman authorities. However, it should be noted this theory is not widely accepted by scholars, and there is little direct evidence to support it. Okay, so I am looking at this. This is Robert Eisenman's chart in the back of James, the brother of Jesus, of relationships, family relationships. And Eisenman suggests that Paul was adopted by Antipater and Kypros, and was the adopted brother of Costobarus and Kypros the third, and that he led a riot in. See, I don't think ChatGPT really has. Was Saulus adopted by Antipater and Kypros, according to Robert Eisenman? See, this is directly not what is in the book here. No, according to Robert Eisenman's theories, Saulus, later known as Paul, was not adopted by Antipater and Kypros. This claim does not appear in Eisenman's published works. I mean, it's right here. Nor is it a widely accepted theory by scholars. It is true that Saulus was a Roman citizen, which suggests that he may have been born into a family of some wealth or status. However, there's no evidence to support the idea that he was adopted by members of the Herodian dynasty, which included Antipater and Kypros. Eisenman does suggest that Saulus had connections to certain members of the Herodian family, such as Costobarus, as I mentioned in my. But he does not claim that Saulus was adopted by them. Yeah, I mean, he directly makes that claim. So ChatGPT is just wrong. I have to wonder if ChatGPT has read the. Have you integrated the text of Robert Eisenman's book The Brother of Jesus into your model? As an artificial intelligence, language model, I've been trained on a vast corpus of text, including books and articles on a wide range of topics, including those related to early Christianity and Judaism. This includes many works by Robert Eisenman, including his book James, the Brother of Jesus. While I have not integrated the entire text of Eisenman's book or any specific book into my model, my training data includes a large and diverse collection of texts that covers a wide range of subjects, including those related to Eisenman's research and theories. As a language model, I am designed to provide information and answer questions based on the text that has been inputted into me. So if you have a question about a specific topic that Eisenman has written about, I may be able to provide an answer based on my training data, including his writing. Does that include the charts in his books? Oh, as an AI language model, my training includes text data from books and other sources, but not visual data such as charts, images, or videos. However, if you provide me with a specific question or information from a chart in one of Eisenman's books, I may be able to provide an answer based on the text information available in my training data. Eisenman has a chart as a genealogy chart in the back of his book. Jesus. The Herodians. Are you familiar with the data? It's thinking. While it's thinking. I confess to fact-checking you in a reactionary zeal as you speak. Now, ask it for arguments against this answer. I always interrogate both sides of the things I'm asking, well, most of the time. This is valuable testing information you are providing. There's the book. Yeah. It's still thinking. ChatGPT is still thinking. Okay, if anybody else wants to jump on and discuss this, I would be interested in discussing this. I am going to take a tiny break, though, 5-minute break, and get more ready and wait for ChatGPT to see if he can answer that question. Okay, so I tried making this a bit bigger. That's not gonna work. Okay. Um, so this was the first answer it gave me, and then I asked it to give me another answer, and the second answer is no, basically. But I guess maybe I should make it bigger just so you guys can see, because yeah. Um, I mean, ultimately, I think this shows some of the weaknesses of ChatGPT in that Robert Eisenman is trying to say more than he proves, and so I think that's part of the problem here. How many people named Solace appear in Josephus? See, that's not what's. Okay, so this is completely different than what he said before. In the works of the ancient Jewish historian Josephus, only one person named Saulus is mentioned. The Saulus is identified as a commander of a Jewish garrison at a place called Masada during the First Jewish-Roman War. Josephus describes Saulus as a brave and resourceful military leader who played a significant role in the defense of Masada against the Roman forces led by Flavius Silva. It is important to note that this Saulus is not to be confused with the Saulus who became known as the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul is not mentioned in the works of Josephus. So now he's saying something, ChatGPT is saying something completely different than what he was saying before, which is, wow. So these are the problems with ChatGPT. Okay, let me see where I'm going to look up Solace. The thing here. Okay. Solace in Josephus. Um, it's 588. Um, oh, well, part of the thing is that Eisenman, um, Eisenman is interested in the Syriac version. Uh, yeah. Um, And the pseudo-Clementines, I don't know what to tell you. The thing is, like, part of the problem is this book is a mess. And I am not sure that if this book were more clearly written, it would be less influential. That it wouldn't be less influential, because I get the feeling that part of the reason why he is as influential as he is because the book is so all over the place that people take bits and pieces of it and apply it. Who is the enemy in the pseudo-Clementine recognitions? In the pseudo-Clementine recognitions, the enemy refers to Simon Magus, a first-century Gnostic teacher who was a contemporary of the apostles Peter and Paul. Simon Magus was known for his claims to have supernatural powers and his teachings on the nature of the divine. According to the recognitions, Simon Magus was a major adversary of the early Christian church, and the book portrays a conflict between Simon and the apostle Peter. The Pseudo-Clementine Recognitions is an early Christian text, likely composed in the 3rd or 4th century CE. It purports to be a record of the teachings and adventures of the Apostle Peter, and it includes a number of doctrinal discussions and debates between Peter and various opponents, including Simon Magus. The text presents a highly polemical view of Simon Magus and his teachings, portraying him as a false teacher and heretic who seeks to lead people away from the true faith. Is Paul of Tarsus mentioned in the recognitions? While the Pseudo-Clementine Recognitions is a work of early Christian literature that focuses on the Apostle Peter and his teachings, it does not mention Paul of Tarsus by name. The text primarily deals with debates between Peter and various heretical teachings, including Simon Magus, and it emphasizes the authority of Peter as a leader of the Christian community. It is possible that some of the teachings and doctrines attributed to Paul in the New Testament are addressed indirectly in the recognitions, but the text does not mention Paul by name or provide any direct references to his life or teachings. What does Robert Eisenman say about Simon Magus and Paul in the recognitions? Robert Eisenman is a scholar of early Christianity and has written extensively about the origins of the Christian movement. In his book, James, the Brother of Jesus, Eisenman analyzes the Pseudo-Clementine Recognitions in detail and provides an interpretation of the book's treatment of Simon Magus and Paul. According to Eisenman, the recognitions presents Simon Magus as the arch enemy of Peter and the true Christian faith, while Paul is portrayed in a more ambiguous light. Eisenman suggests that the recognitions may view Paul as a half-brother or rival of Peter, rather than a true apostle of Christ. Eisenman also notes that the book presents an alternative version of Paul's conversion story, one in which Paul is said to have been sent by Simon Magus to infiltrate the Christian community and sow confusion and dissent. Eisenman's interpretation of the recognitions is based on his analysis of the text's historical and cultural context, as well as his knowledge of early Christian literature and theology. It is important to note, however, that his interpretation is just one of many possible readings of the text, and that scholars may differ in their view of the book's treatment of Simon Magus and Paul. Josephus Antiquities 20. What exactly about Josephus's Antiquities 20 did you want to point out? Chapter 9, 4. Okay, so let's see if I can. This is the problem with being on. Chapter 9, 4. Okay, about this time it was that King Agrippa built Caesarea Philippi, larger than it was before, and in honor of Nero named it Neronius. And while he had built a theater at Berytus with vast expenses, am I reading the correct part? Looks like I am. Vast expenses, he bestowed on them shoes to be exhibited every year, and spent therein many 10,000 drachmae. He also gave the people at large a largesse of corn and distributed oil among them, and adorned the entire city with statues of his own donation, and with original images made by ancient hands. Nay, he almost transferred all that was most ornamental in his own kingdom thither. This made him more than ordinarily hated by his subjects, because he took those things away that belonged to them to adorn a foreign city. And now Jesus, the son of Gamaliel, became the successor of Jesus, the son of Damnius, in the high priesthood, in which the king had taken from the other, on which account a sedition arose between the high priests with regard to one another, for they got together bodies of the boldest sort of the people, and frequently came with reproaches of throwing of stones at each other. But Ananias was too hard for the rest by his riches, which enabled him to gain those that were most ready to receive. Costobarus also and Saulus did themselves get together a multitude of wicked wretches, and this because they were of the royal family, and so they obtained favor among them because of their kindred to Agrippa. But still they used violence with the people, and were very ready to plunder those that were weaker than themselves. And from that time it principally came to pass that our city was greatly disordered, and that all things grew worse and worse among us. Yeah, that is Saulus and Costobarus. That's the Saulus that So, who is Solace mentioned in... Okay. Who is the Solace mentioned in Josephus 294? Bring that correctly, 294. Book 2, Antiquities 294. No. In Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews, Book 2, Chapter 9, Verse 4, Solace is mentioned as the son of Cis and the grandson of Omri, who was the king of Israel in the 9th century BCE. This Solace is mentioned on the context of the anointing of Saul as the king of Israel by the prophet Samuel. No, this is not true. No, that is not what Josephus says. I apologize for the confusion in my previous response. Upon further review, I can confirm that there is no mention of assaults in Antiquities 294 of Josephus. The text describes the anointing of Saul. No, at least that's not what I'm looking at. What are you talking about? Book 20. I'm sorry. I meant 29. Thank you for that. In Antiquity, it mentions a Solace as the brother of the high priest Jonathan, who was, according to Josephus, Solace was a member of the Sanhedrin. No. No, that's not what it says. Why am I arguing with a supposed... I don't know what to say. Yes, the battle between Simon Peter and Simon Magus. Simon Magus is a cooler name than Simon Peter. Okay. You guys weren't watching me arguing with ChatGPT. I was arguing with ChatGPT. I mean, I'm looking at Antiquities of the Jews 29:4, and ChatGPT just gives bad answers. Regenerate this response. Thank you for the correction. In Antiquities 29, Josephus mentions a Solace who was the commander of the Jewish army during the reign of Queen Alexandra, and the brother of the high priest Jonathan. This Solace is not the same person. Okay. I don't know if we're getting anywhere. Back to James, the brother of Jesus. So, in summary, Robert Eisenman thinks that there was a vast rewriting of the Christian corpus, specifically Acts, where James was marginalized, as was Jesus's actual teachings and role, and instead we ended up with a Pauline Christianity. And so before Timothy came on, I was actually going to start by talking about the documentary hypothesis. Now, I have to say, I mean, people especially say, okay, you reject the documentary hypothesis for the Old Testament, but you don't reject it for the New Testament. And I did reject it for the New Testament because I rejected it for the Old Testament. The problem is that's one of my verbal tics people have. If you want to know your verbal tics, start a YouTube channel. The problem is that when I looked at the documentary hypothesis for the Hebrew Bible, I just found it silly. Because I see no reason why the same person can't write in different styles. I found this insistence that we were able to take a text apart. And I mean, this did go into the discussion when Rabbi Mallet was like, okay, you're not defending the integrity of the Tanakh. And I have to say, I don't feel a compulsion to defend the integrity of the Tanakh the way a lot of people do. I believe that Torah is true. I believe that the 5 books of Moses are true. I believe that the 5 books of Moses are what God revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai. For me, that doesn't mean that if there is a discrepancy between Zecher and Zecher, or even, so this is the thing, like, if one letter is off, it's, the Torah scroll is puzzled, right? But at the same time, I don't think that means it's that has to mean it. Like, I'm not saying that it's not exactly letter for letter how Moses wrote it, except for the last 10 lines. Not saying I'm convinced of that at all. I'm saying that even if it weren't, that wouldn't change my beliefs. Whereas when you look at the Christian Bible, when you look at the New Testament, what I think is rather obvious is that it's been rewritten. It's like there's crayon all over the place. You can see the difference, not in a matter of the same person expressing similar ideas or in different ways, but rather a sort of perversion that, okay, so all the texts where it says, and so it is until this day, right? This is the actual example, right, of what it's like to read the Christian Bible in reference to the Jewish Bible, right? So when it says, and so it is until this day, right? Well, is that Moses speaking in prophecy about how things would be in a future date? And does that future date include now, which is 2,000 years later, right? These are the things that if somebody can't accept that sentence, and so it is to this day, is 100% exactly precisely how Moses wrote it, I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's something that somehow keeps you from being Jewish. And I understand the people who want to defend that line. At the same time, I don't feel like there needs to. Isn't the difference between letters the basis of Talmudic discussions? Chazal approach the text if all variations are from on high. Yeah, and I have to say, so when Christians make a huge deal about how Rashi says there's a tikkun sofrim in Genesis regarding Abraham talking to God, right? And what's Rashi saying there? That there was a tikkun sofrim, that it was written in a certain way, and then the scribes, out of a sort of respect for God, changed the exact wording there, right? See, this is the thing. I don't think you have to believe that the Torah scrolls we have today mimic in a facsimile copy, Xerox copy way. And in fact, they obviously do not, because obviously when Moses wrote, it was not in Ashurit, it was in Katav Ivri. We know that, right? So at the very least, the Katav is different, right? And so to put too much of an emphasis there, I think, is a mistake in a modernist interpretation. But that's very different from what we see when we look at the Gospels, where, okay, you have 4 different versions of the Gospels, and there is no reconciling them the way that Judaism reconciles the texts of the Torah. And I have to say, I certainly don't believe that this level of exactitude applies to the rest of Nach, Nevi'im and Ketuvim. And I don't think that's even controversial within Judaism. The Masoretes even preserve textual variation. This is the thing. Yeah. And I think it's obvious that the documentary hypothesis is how you end up approaching the Christian Bible if you take it at all seriously. And you have to. Because that's the only way to understand it and to make it understood. And once you do that, once you seriously involve yourself in textual analysis, either you have to abandon the textual analysis for a more traditional view of of how, and by traditional I mean Masoretic, right? And I think that's why books like this and the Dead Sea Scrolls are such a bigger deal for Protestants than they are for Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. I don't think you can retain your intellectual integrity, look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, and maintain your Protestant hermeneutic. And honestly, like, where's Sam? I wish I could have this discussion with Sam, because Sam is trying to do that, very much so, right? He's trying to stay a Protestant, take the Dead Sea Scrolls seriously, and be a serious Bible believing Christian. I'm not sure you can do that. And, I keep on going back to when I visited John MacArthur's church, Grace Community Church, and I saw a reaction in him, a kind of defensiveness, because this is coming down the line. Like, the ideas here are disseminating. And so the next book I'm going to read is The Jesus Dynasty by James Tabor. And James Tabor is no longer identifiably Christian, even though he is Christian, I would say. Most people would say he's not Christian, and he doesn't even claim it for himself very much. But I think if you're going to be honest to the Protestant hermeneutic, and I think he is honest to the Protestant hermeneutic, that's where you end up being. And honestly, I think if you're an honest, if you're an honest Protestant, you're going to end up as a Noahide. You just are. Because Pauline Christianity, as it has developed over the past 2,000 years, is obviously a break from Christianity as it existed way back when. And I think I'm not claiming any sort of special knowledge. It's not anything that Father Stephen told me. As best I get it from Father Stephen's discussion with Sam, actually. It seems to me that he was jolted out of the Protestant way of looking at things into a Masoretic way of looking at things, which I think is what Eastern Orthodoxy and ultimately Catholicism are about, right? This idea that, okay, here I am, somebody who believes in Jesus. And what has brought me here into my beliefs of Jesus is not a perfect preservation of what was taught 2,000 years ago. I see what you're doing, but I don't think that this argument is that great. It seems a more appropriate critique would be related to the epistemic validity of higher criticism. Protestantism leads to atheism. I think we're not talking about the epistemic validity of higher criticism. We're talking about the epistemic validity of modernism, of this idea that if I had a video recording of what actually happened in those scenes recorded by the Bible, I would have a better version of the Bible than I have now, which obviously isn't. I don't think you can even argue about this, that the Bible does not represent itself as a sort of objective recording of all pertinent facts the way some dispassionate observer that is standing from nowhere would record it. And that includes, like, if you think that fitting Jesus with a GoPro for the entirety of his life, right? Let's say that we had some capacity to go back, create a completely infallible, completely true vision of just imagine Jesus wore a GoPro, like the three magi gave his parents a GoPro, right? And magically that GoPro had 40 years, 50 years, whatever, how many years until the crucifixion, right? Had enough battery to last at that entire time. And Jesus wore that the whole time. And you could say the similar thing about Moses as well, right? If you believe that sitting there and watching those 40 years of what exactly would be recorded by a GoPro gives you more truth than the Bible itself, I think you're making an absolute mistake. You're making a real mistake. You're making a very childish mistake. And I think that's the problem with the modernist view, with the Protestant view, and I think that has infected even Orthodox Judaism. And to some degree, a lot of what is wrong with Orthodox Judaism is that view. Elijah says, I disagree. Higher criticism is the rejection of tradition and traditional understandings. It assumes that the text itself is an attestation, the author's intention without tradition. It is completely modern. Higher criticism is definitely based in a modern view, yes. but I don't think a rejection. I think a rejection of higher criticism, which is based on the assertion that the Bible is the equivalent of a GoPro video of things that happened, is similarly rooted in modernism, and it's not enough of a it's not enough of a rejection of modernism. I don't know if I'm being clear there. I agree. No GoPro. It's dumb, modern, and obviously not true. Okay, we've been going for over an hour. Unless somebody wants to join and discuss this, I would love to discuss this book more. Um, if anybody wants to discuss it, the biggest problem is it's so rambling that I don't think it's a. It's not worth reading. That's the problem. It's not worth reading. At the same time, I think it's probably already been one of the most. I call the GoPro reading of text the forensic reading of text. No, I think you're talking about something different, Garth. The forensic reading is an attempt. Have you reached out to Sam about having a discussion? So Sam's feeling is he wants me to basically give him a synopsis of what's important in this book. Like, okay, he spent 1,000 pages. What did he convince me of in these 1,000 pages? That the pseudo Clementines are probably earlier than a lot of us thought. I don't know if it's newly convincing me that Paul was, in fact, a horrible person who worked for the Herodians. The thing is that that's seeped into the rest of academia already. I mean, you look at the work of James Tabor, it's been highly influenced by this. And it's not like, and I would say Bart Ehrman as well. Even though Bart Ehrman will dismiss Robert Eisenman completely, I think he's been definitely influenced by it. And to the degree that the ideas here, like, has this been completely sucked dry of its influence? No, I don't think so. Because it's kind of like that idea that we know there's a source of gravity, like there's a black hole. Like, this is a black hole that is influencing the movement of the academics. Yeah, James, the brother of Jesus, as a well of gravity which lets no light escape and bends the fabric of academic space-time around itself. There you go. That's my review of James, the brother of Jesus. Okay, I'm going to end this broadcast and probably have a just chatting stream sometime later today once I do some homework and stuff.